So estate planning is not something you can just set and forget. You got to be paying attention, because every election, estate planning is up for, discussion. Every administration, it can be really confusing and difficult. And that's why, most, law firms that you would go to that help you set up an estate plan, but they typically don't come back to you and say, hey, things have changed. We need to change things for you. And that's where having a good financial advisor can say, hey, the laws have changed. We need to restructure your estate plan.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans with Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to our amazing podcast. This is where we reveal the top 1% of business concepts and systems and processes to scale 8 and 9-figure businesses. We interview top-level 8 and 9-figure CEOs, business owners, and amazing TEDx speakers like David Meltzer. We got Nick Cavuto, Pascal Bachman, and so many others. And if you feel like this resonates with you, please share this with your friend, your family, and make sure you impact them as well, because we're trying to spread the message on those that do not know how to scale 8, 9-figure businesses and talking higher level business concepts. So guys, remember, enjoy the episode and be uncommon if you can. Cheers.
Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host today, like always, Christian D. Evans. Guys, I'm very excited about having this next guest on. He is a managing wealth manager at Creative Planning. We've all heard about rich and making a lot of cash flow and doing that stuff, which is awesome. But it's about really building wealth, generational legacy, right? And there's a lot that goes into it, how to structure it, how to make sure you have the right tax plan. And we're going to dive into some really, really fun stuff today at very, very deep levels. So make sure you hold on to your hats and make sure you really dive in. Now, this next guest, he works with Creative Planning, which manages almost over $200 billion of people's wealth, from charities to financial planning, to wills, to trust, estate planning, tax planning, charitable planning, business succession plan, which is huge for a lot of our listeners, risk management, and so much more, definitely in today's kind of financial world. This guest has been featured in CNBC, named Creative Planning the #1 independent wealth manager. He has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, has been featured in different other publications, has appeared multiple times as a guest on CNBC's On the Money show. Please welcome certified financial planner and wealth manager at Creative Planning, my friend, the one and only Kevin Timmerman. How are you doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Christian. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. And my first question, very simply, is this, is what I find so interesting after talking to a lot of high net worth and a lot of family offices that manage very, very well-off families. It's not so much about growing their worth as it is about preservation.
Yep.
And what I found so interesting is just the paradigm shift that I think a lot of people, that our audience needs to understand. When you're in that situation where you got to mitigate loss, and you got to start thinking defensively, not offensively as much. So let me ask you, Kevin, when you're having these conversations with these individuals, these wealth families, maybe they just sold and had an amazing exit strategy, or maybe they just have, kind of generational wealth. What were some things that you do to help sure that you have that preservation kind of mindset, paradigm shift versus that growth mindset?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing is the client's asset allocation. How much risk do they want to take? Do they want to be 100% in the stock market? Do they want to be in alternative investments? Usually we find, people that, sell businesses and have a lot of net worth are attracted to the alternative investments. They don't want to be just stuck in, mutual funds or stocks and bonds, but they're looking for something that maybe isn't directly correlated with the stock market, and that gives them an extra level of diversification. Also, people, with significant wealth, they're looking to protect the downside of the investments that they have. So we may use stock options, puts and calls, to protect that downside. We'll also have a portion of their portfolio that's in safe investments, if there is such a thing. Everything is subject to some risk, but investments that have less volatility, so they can feel comfortable that if the stock market crashes, that their entire net worth isn't, going down significantly. But every client, I don't think I've met two clients that are exactly the same. I meet people that sell a business and they want to get right back into it, be really aggressive. And then I also meet clients that that want to be very conservative, want to protect their nest egg. They built that business for 20, 30, 40 years, and they don't want to see anything happen to that. So it's all across the board. And that's why we start with, at creative planning, we start with a financial plan. We want to get to know every client. What are their goals? What are their objectives? What their biggest fears. And then once you start managing a portfolio or a client's wealth to a financial plan, a written financial plan, it becomes a lot easier for us and a lot easier for our clients. Today, with the market being as volatile as it is, there's a lot of panic, that goes through people's minds, especially people with higher net worths. What I found is, more money, more worries. And so if we can go back to the plan and show people that, hey, it doesn't matter that the S&P 500 is down, 20% or whatever, you're still on track. The plan is still working.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because you put it over a long enough time period, time horizon. So many people, and what's so interesting to me, and this is one of the things I found so interesting, after connecting, networking with some people that have 9-figure, net worth to 8-figure net worth, et cetera, right? And what I found so interesting is that people are still people. They think emotionally sometimes, not logically. And like you mentioned, really just reiterating, working with someone like yourself, Kevin, that's able to bounce this idea off and say, okay, well, we've already looked at your financial plan. We're already aligned. We're right on path. Yes, this is kind of a little hurdle or a little bump in the road, right? When the stock market crashed after COVID or right before COVID or during COVID, and when it went back up and all that stuff, and now we're seeing the kind of recession, inflation. There's a lot of dynamics that are going on. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, Kevin, and pivot toward away from kind of the typical instruments that we always hear, right? Index, et cetera, because there's been a lot of content in regards to that. I want to talk a little bit about kind of really making sure how to play and to build out your infrastructure financial plan in a defensible way, right? And what I mean by that is insurances, whole life insurance policies. I found that very intriguing. A lot of high net worth individuals leverage those vehicles. And then as well as just also alternative investments that are able to help them expedite that better capital gains, et cetera. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that.
About the various instruments that we use. I mean, with high net worth individuals, it's a lot more than a few mutual funds. What you mentioned, whole life insurance, that can be a tool in a portfolio. We don't use a whole lot of whole life insurance. We pretty much use term insurance for our clients, but there is definitely a place for whole life insurance, and it's usually in the more complicated estates or complicated client situations. As far as alternative investments, we use everything from private equity. Bain Capital Management is one of the firms that we use. That's a great way to invest in companies that aren't listed on the stock exchange, but have a lot of potential for growth. And so since we don't work on a commission basis at all, we negotiate deals with these private equity firms or alternative investment organizations, and because we want to give all the benefit to our client. Another interesting alternative investment are the life settlement funds. I don't know if you've heard of those before, but it's where funds will buy life insurance policies from people. And it's kind of a strange concept, kind of weird to talk about, because as people pass away, the fund benefits. The fund receives a death benefit. And so that's an asset class that has no correlation whatsoever with the stock market. I guess it could, if the stock market really tanked, maybe a lot of people pass away or have heart attacks, but that's I'm just kidding. That's not the case. Ironically, during COVID, when when I say during COVID, I don't know if we're out of COVID yet, but when we're in the heat of it, the middle of it, this fund actually suffered. Fewer people died during COVID that sold their life insurance policies than they had previously. So it was really kind of a strange, unpredictable thing. So even though a lot of people looked at the life settlement fund as kind of a risk-free investment, there is no risk-free investment. And if people outlive their life expectancies, that means that the fund has to continue to pay premiums longer than they had once thought. Private lending is also another area that is pretty popular. Until recently, interest rates have been so low that there's really, bonds paid virtually nothing. CDs paid virtually nothing. So we use private lending funds, that would lend money to small businesses, maybe businesses that weren't able to get really good loans at traditional banks. So that was a way to boost fixed income rates of return. So there's a lot of different vehicles out there. It's just a matter of finding, which ones are the best fit for the client and their risk tolerance.
Yeah, and let me ask you this, because it's so interesting to me, because it is very contextual, right? Because this one advice can be really cool, but if you're at that age where you're retiring, then it may not be that right advice, right? And so I want to talk a little bit about your approach in regards to unpacking kind of where they're at, not just like personality, but also kind of, their end all be all. Like, how does creative planning kind of facilitate that needs analysis, or that financial needs analysis, to be able to identify, okay, hey, we know that your risk tolerances on a scale 1 to 10 are kind of a 1 or 2. That's cool. So we're going to go ahead and put instruments into play. And your goal is not to really grow exponentially, like you mentioned. It's more preservation. And what I found so interesting is about metrics a little bit. So I was talking to someone, and it's like, hey, if you're at $100,000, just make math easy. You lose 50,000. You almost have to get 100% return just to get back to ground zero. And I found that very interesting, because it helps people put it in context. It's easier to just preserve. So many of us want to go in and get a 12, 13% year over year growth or whatever. And the reality is, hey, you know what? Having a good, consistent 6, 7%, 8% year over year growth over a 10-year period of time is a better preservation than, okay, hey, guess what? We got 12% one year. We got -5 one year. We got 15 the next, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd love for you to just unpack that strategy a little bit.
Yeah, you made a really good point. Consistency is really important. You don't want a lot of volatility, because even if the rate of return on average is better, the problem is trying to keep clients in the market, stick to the plan when the market drops 20%. A lot of times you don't have that much rope, if they're going to panic when the market goes down. You mentioned 2 or 3%, clients, wanting that. Usually when we do the financial plan and we show them, hey, over the next, 20 years, this is what you can expect to have if you earn 2 or 3%. Here's what you can expect to have if you earned, 6 or 7%. Usually that snaps people out of it a little bit. They look at, hey, you know what? I would rather create multi-generational wealth than worry about just preserving wealth for myself. And then also, if you're going for 2 or 3%, look at inflation today. You're losing purchasing power. So I always tell people there's risk out there no matter what you're in. You could be in cash. There's risk. If you were sitting in cash right now, you lost what, 7-8% this year, and just because of inflation. So it's all about purchasing power. So we really want to get to know the clients, and one of the ways that we get to know clients is by helping them with their estate planning. You can learn a lot about people when you start talking about estate planning. Do they want money going to their children, their grandchildren? Do they have charities? Do they not care at all, where their money goes when they pass on? And I see people all across the board. So I love, reviewing people's estate plans. It just tells so much about them that, we can start there and say, okay, ultimately, what do you want to accomplish with this wealth? And we also explain to people, if you have significant wealth, it's important to be a good steward of that wealth. You don't want to waste it. You don't want to, not invest it. You want it working somewhat hard for you, so you can benefit, both family and charities. So there's, that's one, the plan itself, and then looking at the estate planning goals of clients is really big in helping us understand, what needs to be done for a client.
Let me ask you this, because I found this very interesting in business, but also in wealth creation. So in business, we always talk about niching down, right? And I've known a lot of people that have, I should say a lot of people, a few people that have, $100 million net worth. They had an exit, cool, wonderful. And after you're connecting and talking with them and understanding their alignment in regards to their structure, they say, hey, we're only focused on real estate and, SaaS. And because they came from that industry, so they're familiar with the industry, they're familiar with what that looks like. So they're not getting into environmental, they're not getting into biotech, they're not getting into all these other things that they're not familiar with. Now, I know we're kind of talking about alternative investing in that, but I just want to ask in regards to maybe alignment in regards to like the estate, when you have all your assets maybe in XYZ, okay, cool. Is there diversity? Like, for example, real estate. Yes, we're in real estate, we're heavy in real estate, but within real estate itself, industry, we're diversified. Maybe we have some commercial, maybe we have some, triple net leasing, maybe we have more residential. So diversification is contextual, but we're still in the industry that we're very familiar with. Or am I mistaken on that thought process?
No, I think what you're pointing out is, a lot of people build wealth, acquire wealth through concentration. They're into real estate, they're into a certain sector, they're into a certain company. That's how you really create massive wealth, through concentration. Now, to protect wealth, you need diversification. So that, once you've accumulated that $200 million that you're talking about, it's probably time to take some of the chips off the table and spread it out. Because as quickly as you can build wealth through concentration, you can also lose wealth quickly through concentration. We've seen that, just a random example, just look at Bitcoin. People built wealth by concentrating in Bitcoin. They made tons of money, but what they should have done is, once they made all of that money, is then protected that wealth by diversifying, getting out of it. They stayed in it too long, and then all of a sudden, through concentration, they lost significant wealth. So once you have that large number, that huge nest egg, then it's to me, it's a totally different mindset that you have to have in managing your portfolio.
Well, you bring up a really solid point, Kevin. And I'm so glad we're talking about this, because as much, and this is just like human psychology, human nature, where when we think something's going good, we think it's going to go good forever. And when we think something bad's happening, we think something bad's going to happen forever. But it's really a matter of building that right infrastructure and saying, okay, you know what, when things are going bad, how do we mitigate that loss? And a good lesson that I learned in stocks, and something was very, very valuable, and some rule that I whenever I bought a stock, it was like swing trading or momentum trading. When it would go up 3 points or 4 points, whatever my target was, I would take 80% off that position and I would cash in. And then the 20% I would let ride and see where it would go. Because then I was able to mitigate the loss, and I was able to, and the same thing with, if it would drop down by 1.5 points, I would totally remove my whole position. Because again, that whole concept of, hey, I'd rather remove my position. Or let me ask you, Kevin, is that the wrong thought process? And again, I know we're talking kind of contextually, it depends upon each person's infrastructure, et cetera, but I just want to talk strategically and tactically, how to think through that.
Yeah, so our approach, we're not overly tactical. What you're talking about is kind of a short-term trading, momentum trading, and that's more exciting. It's more fun to talk about. But history.
Well, let me put it in more context. like with like, let's say for example, someone invests into an alternative company, right? Maybe a VC, maybe a PE, and they start realizing, okay, it's not turning the dial as quickly as possible in that time frame. We're actually spending more money. It's not producing any cash flow, or maybe a real estate or whatever it may be. How to make sure that you have the right proper processes and thought process and mitigating that loss. And I know like indexes and mutual funds, those are more stable instruments. I'm talking a little bit more riskier just because for our audience, for those that want to obviously maximize.
Yeah. I would say the best thing you can do is find a good financial advisor, first of all, because what you're referring to is, a lot of us act on impulse. And like you were mentioning earlier, when this things start going down, we envision it just going down forever. And when things are going up, we expect it to continue going up forever. So really, every investor needs basically a financial therapist, to keep them in the market when they need to be in the market, or helping them cut bait on an investment, when it's not working, or it's pretty clear that they're throwing good money after bad. But it's really difficult. I mean, the psychology of money with people, to me, is so interesting, because they have greed and fear are, two strongest emotions, and they screw up more portfolios than any investment ever will. And so, we see people that will invest in maybe an alternative investment or some real estate or something, and they will ride it all the way down, because psychologically they don't want to take a loss. So, they won't look at, a sunk cost. They'll just say, hey, I'm not bailing on this until I get my money back. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of emotion that goes into it, and that's why I really don't think anyone should manage their own money, because that includes me, because we're all subject to emotional impulses, and like I said earlier, those emotional impulses are what's going to destroy your portfolio. If you have a solid plan in place, you have a solid investment philosophy, and you stick to it, it will work out. It's going to work out. But if you're jumping around, from different investment strategies, it's kind of like changing lanes in at the supermarket. You're always going to jump into the one that you think is going to be faster, but it turns out to be slower than the one you're in.
That is a beautiful analogy, Kevin. I'm so glad, because that just brings it so streamlined for everybody. Like, everybody has experienced that. We jump into this one, we jump into that one, we jump into this. Like, oh my gosh, if we would just stay in this one, you'd be going through already.
Right.
And,
yeah.
Same thing, anything. So let's talk a little bit about this, okay? So you talked about really building out the estate planning. And just like with anything, you have to ask questions, but it is not asking, repetitive questions. You have to ask the right questions. And I think a lot of people, when they're going into, and I've seen this where they've exited, they get a lot of money, and it's like very tempting to have that strategy. And like you mentioned, you need to find someone. So someone's listening, they say, okay, gotcha. I need a financial planner that's very well established, a therapist, what you mentioned, someone that can keep me accountable to that plan, which is beautiful, and put in those boundaries. Now, when they have that conversation, what questions should they be, asking? What maybe even thoughts that they should be thinking to say, okay, well, how do I want to structure this? Well, how do I want to align this? Because it's not an overnight thing. It's a 6-8 month process to really get alignment, and there's always constant adjustment. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about proper questions.
Yeah, I mean, it can be really basic. What's important to you? What's important? What's the most important thing? You have a limited number of years to live. What do you want to accomplish? Do you want to spend time with your family? Do you want to give to a certain charity? It's really a values conversation, more than anything. What's important? What's important about money to them? What does money represent? Does money represent safety, security, opportunity? How do they look at money? Do they want to see their money doing positive things during their lifetime? Or do they just want to envision, what's going to happen upon their passing? So estate planning is really values driven. A lot of wealthy people, don't want to give a significant portion of their net worth to their children, because we've seen time and time again, when you drop millions of dollars into a younger person's lap, they don't always turn out so well, and so, I mean, I think Warren Buffett, he's only given his kids or his daughter, I can't remember how many children he has, a very small amount relative to what his net worth is. And so, and then you'll have other people that will say, no, I want my kids to get it all, so it's really just finding out what's important to people, and really nothing more than that. And once we know what's important to them, then we can build the plan around those values.
So I was talking to a family, and they own a very well-established business. Does about $4 or $5 billion a year. And the way that the two founders passed away, but the way they structured their estate was just beautiful. And I thought that was really interesting, how they not only really, when you were 18, 17 years old, you got a potential writing opportunity to have a voting right on the board. There were a certain amount of seats on the board themselves. Now the next generation is kind of the one that's the CEO and the founder, the CEO and the operations, et cetera. However, though, what I found very interesting is they built it underneath a different trust foundation of some sort. Now, I want to ask in regards to establishing the trust, the foundation, and then as well as making sure that you have the right proper kind of structure of it. I know that it's very contextual, depending upon, like you mentioned, where their end goal is. But I'd love for you to maybe just kind of, outline a baseline structure of what they should be expecting when they're building out their proper estate. I've seen some people have different vehicles that protect their assets so that it's not in there. So I'd love for you to just talk about that.
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, there's so many different types of trusts that you can set up. The most common trust is a revocable living trust. And so you're basically putting all your assets into a trust, but it's the benefits of a trust over a will are a trust does not have to go through probate. Probate is brutal, especially for wealthy people, because it's public information, and most wealthy people don't want, all the nosy people out there or the criminals to know, how much they were worth or who inherited their money. So probate also involves courts and attorneys, so it can be costly, take a lot of time. So virtually anybody with any wealth will want a trust, to avoid the probate process of a will. Now, then if you get into, estate taxes, if that's an important thing, a revocable trust will not help you with estate taxes. There you have to set up irrevocable trusts. So you're basically gifting money outside of your estate. You get that money outside of your estate, it grows outside of your estate, and then when you pass away, you don't pay any, your estate doesn't pay any estate taxes on that. There's charitable remainder trusts, if you want to give to a charity upon your death. So you can live off the income that the trust produces, but upon your death, the proceeds go to a charity, and there's some tax benefits to doing it that way. I mean, basically anything that you can think of can be done with a certain type of trust. Irrevocable life insurance trusts, people set those up and have those whole life policies inside the trust. So then, upon their passing, that death benefit is outside of their estate, and that death benefit can be used to pay estate taxes. And then, some people like to set up family foundations. They want to set up something that, multi-generational charitable giving. There's a little bit of complication or, work that has to go into setting up a family foundation, especially if you want to manage it and run it yourself. That's why donor advised funds are really popular. With a donor advised fund, you can gift money to this already established, basically charitable fund. And then over time, you can dictate who receives those dollars. So you get the tax deduction up front. Someone else handles all the paperwork. and you can give money away as you please, and that's outside of your estate as well. So there's a lot of different vehicles and strategies that you can use. Now, for a lot of people, the estate taxes aren't a problem. The gift tax or the exemption amount is pretty high right now. 13 million, I think, per person. So people, a married couple can give away $26 million without any gift or estate tax. But once you get past that, the estate tax is 40%. That's federal. That's not counting state estate tax. So it can be pretty expensive. So again, depending on what your objectives are, there's a lot of different routes you can go.
So let's say that again, that last part there. So you can up depending upon what tier you are in, you can give up to almost $26 million tax free. And what does that include? Explain that.
So that's a married couple. So it's 13 million a piece, and it's not exactly 13 million. I think it's 12.8 or something like that right now, but it's pushing 13 million. So you could give an individual could give away $13 million worth of assets with no estate tax whatsoever. Now, if you're married,
every year? Pardon? Every year?
No. That's one time.
Okay.
Yeah. Every year you can give away $16,000 or $17,000 to anyone you want. So that's, for a lot of people, that doesn't put a dent into their net worth. But what's nice about it now is, before, if you passed away, you lost that exemption. And so people would set up a trust so that when they passed away, that money would go into the trust and they wouldn't lose it. Under today's laws, let's say if I passed away, my exemption then goes to my wife. She can elect to take my exemption. So now she has a $26 million exemption. Now, what makes estate planning so problematic is that the laws change all the time. So at the end of 2025, that $13 million exemption is set to revert back to what it was. So it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 6 million per person. So estate planning is not something you can just set and forget. You got to be paying attention, because every election, estate planning is up for discussion. Every administration, it can be really confusing and difficult, and that's why most law firms that you would go to, that help you set up an estate plan, but they typically don't come back to you and say, hey, things have changed, we need to change things for you. And that's where having a good financial advisor can say, hey, the laws have changed, we need to restructure your estate plan.
Gotcha. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important for those that don't get into politics to understand the importance of politics, because it does, have a direct effect. Whatever law that they put in, whether it's IRS or whatever, tax law or tax code, it directly affects. And that's a very good, important. I appreciate you sharing that. I did not know. I've heard other charitable donations and gift, but I didn't know you could do up to once 13 million per person. If it's a couple, 26. So that's really interesting, 13 million. Now, I want to ask you in regards to charities. I have seen where some people create their own charity and funnel all their resources and benefits and philanthropy through that, or having just external charities or third-party charities that they don't actually own or have underneath their conglomerate. What's the difference, and what's kind of the tax benefits? Because I have seen different things, for a reason why people have it underneath their own versus just working with third party.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated, and the estate planning attorneys on our team could articulate it much better than I can. But there are different tax benefits whether you set up your own foundation versus a donor advised fund, for example. But usually the hassle of having your own outweighs any benefits. I see very few people set up their own private foundation. Because you're subject to, first of all, the IRS is all over you. They want to make sure that you're not utilizing your foundation for your own personal benefit. So there's a lot of restrictions on what you can do. You can't give a big donation to a school that one of your children is going to and have them derive some benefit from it. So in my own personal experience, I've really only dealt with, for the most part, donor advised funds. People that have there's already a charitable fund set up and they just contribute to that. But then again, there are people that want to have the private foundation because they basically want to have their family involved and maybe give their children jobs at that family foundation. So they're, I guess it's a way to ensure that their children are working, in some capacity. But the foundations, that's, like I said, that's an area where I'm not. That's not my expertise.
Gotcha. And that makes sense. I appreciate you just explaining it. And I do understand that that's why, you have creative planning, as an organization and conglomerate, there's in each one of these categories that we're talking about, for those that are listening, there's so much that goes into it. So there's that estate, there's the structure, there's the legal, there's the LLC, there's the funneling, there's the asset allocation, et cetera, right? And so what we're talking about today, we're kind of giving an overarching picture, but also understanding the importance of really how complicated this whole thing is and all the decisions you have to make. And
Right.
I appreciate you just sharing that, Kevin.
Yeah, no one person, no one advisor can do all of this. That's one of the unique things about creative planning is we work as teams. So I'm a team leader, I'm a managing director, but on my team, I have a dedicated estate planning attorney, a dedicated CPA, a dedicated trader, a dedicated financial planner, all of these people. And so collectively, we can provide, all of the tools and resources that a client needs. But, we don't, the traditional stockbroker was kind of a one man or one woman shop and kind of try to do everything. We look at it more like a medical practice. You go into a medical practice, you have your general practitioners, and you have a heart problem, they're going to direct you to the heart surgeon or the heart specialist, or the neurologist. That's more how creative planning is set up, but you still have that lead financial advisor that's pulling everything together and making sure that it's all coordinated.
And that's why it's so important for our audience to understand this, because I think I've talked to some people that they've had, just like with anything, right? They've had a bad coach, or they've had a bad financial planner, or a CPA, et cetera. And the reality is that you need all. Right? Because depending upon obviously what you want to achieve and helping you kind of develop that holistic approach. And there's a complication. And that's why I have you on, Kevin, to unpack this. It's like, oh, this makes sense. What do you do with this wealth? Now, I want to talk a little bit about the taxes, because since the Trump era too, I don't know if it actually occurred yet or if it's impacted yet, but I do know that there were some tax regulations since Trump to Biden, and Biden's obviously, and I don't know, again, this is not my expertise. I don't know if it got passed or it has not, or if it's still in fruition. But I do understand from what I was talking about, definitely in the real estate industry, you could max out or take, oh gosh, what was the word? I can't think of it now. You can max out your discretionary income or depreciation, excuse me. You can max out depreciation on your real estate. In with their tax laws. Now, I don't know, now that's just real estate, for example, but I also understand that the capital gains is 20% compared to what it was. So I don't know, has that changed? What does that look like? And how to make sure, like, what other assets they could put in to mitigate their taxes?
Yeah, capital gains rates have not changed yet. Although, when Biden was elected, there was a lot of fear that capital gains taxes were going to go up. And so it was really interesting that I had several people that wanted to realize capital gains before the capital gains tax went up. Now, to me, I thought that was kind of crazy, because watching politics, they'll come out and make these big bold statements and act like they're going to say capital gains rates are going to go to. Actually, what I think they were trying to do is make capital gains rates the same as ordinary income tax rates. So if you were in the highest tax bracket, that would basically double your capital gain tax. Now that hasn't happened yet, and so I always caution people, just because a politician is out there talking about it, they're going to ask for the world, but hopefully they're going to come back and somewhere in the middle. But I don't know. I don't want to get into too much politics, but I think we lost the middle. We got far left, we got far right, and I don't know where the middle is anymore. But taxes. I mean, that's an area. We have about 70 CPAs on staff at Creative Planning, and their job is to constantly monitor the political climate, the tax implications that could be coming down the pipe, to help prepare our clients for whatever may occur. But tax is where you really need professional help. I mean, and that's where you have to have specialists. I would say that's our tax team. I lean on them heavily when it comes to tax planning. But good tax planning can save lots of money. People always want to focus on their investment rate of return. Well, sometimes your investment rate of return looks like nothing compared to the tax savings you can do with a great tax strategy.
Well, so I want to talk a little bit about this, because I don't want to talk too much about the intricacies of the tax code. The reason why is because once this is published, everything could change drastically, right? You and I know it's just on a time scale. So I want to kind of take this evergreen a little bit. I want to have the right perspective on how to look at taxes. And the reason why I'm saying this is because my generation is very just anti-capitalistic a little bit, okay? And they have this perspective on tax, like, yay, cool, that's good. But also I want to understand and explain why taxes are good and why the wealthy try to minimize their tax. Because like you mentioned, we can't really control inflation. We can't really control maybe the interest rates. That's kind of the Fed. And so there's certain things as wealthy individuals you're not able to really control. But one thing you can control is mitigating or eliminating or decreasing that tax. And like you just mentioned, well, shoot, that's the same thing with running a business. Hey, if I can decrease my expenses, well, that means more margin, right?
Right.
And yeah, we can always increase and make more money, but also that's something that I can control in a business. And explain maybe the perspective on why that's important, mitigating and decreasing. And I know that's so baseline, but I think it's so important because I feel like a lot of people just have this misconvoluted way of thinking about taxes.
Well, the power of investing, compounding is, what did Einstein say, the eighth wonder of the world? I mean, you want to get that snowball, rolling downhill and growing and growing and growing. And so there's two things that you can somewhat control to keep that snowball growing, and that's fees and taxes. And if you're not paying attention to your fees, every dollar that goes out the door is a dollar that's not compounding. Every extra dollar that you pay in taxes is a dollar that's not compounding. And so it's not necessarily how much you save this year in taxes. It's what that dollar does, what that dollar that you saved in taxes, how that grows over the rest of your lifetime. That's where the biggest impact is. And so, a lot of times people will say, oh, it's not that big of a deal or whatever, but extrapolate that out, have that dollar earn 7% a year over the next 20 years and see what that looks like. Then all of a sudden that tax burden looks a lot bigger than what it was initially.
Could we talk a little bit about and I appreciate you explaining this, maybe not like a case study, because I know we can't talk about clients, but maybe share with us a situation where it was a creative, maybe someone on your team looked at this huge situation and said, okay, hey, how can we creatively decrease their taxes in different instruments that we have access to? I'd love for you to maybe just share a story or something along that line. I know we can't mention names, et cetera, and I don't want to mention names, but maybe a situation that was like that where, hey, we're able to use these certain instruments. This was the situation. They had $10 million of taxes they owed. We were able to deploy the capital in XYZ and mitigate that or decrease that taxes. And so because of XYZ, whatever that looks like.
Well, I can give you a couple of examples. A lot of times when people have a liquidity event, they'll sell a business, for $20 million, $50 million. And they'll say, geez, I'm really nervous here. I don't know if I want to put it in the stock market. I don't know if I want to invest it. And one of I think one of the biggest things that we do for our clients is tax loss harvesting. So for example, I had a client invest $20 million at the beginning of the year. And I told them, I said, the best thing that can happen to you this year is for the stock market to go down. I think when I said that, they were ready to fire me, because they're like, what are you talking about? We want the stock market to go up. But if you think about it, in the year that you have this huge capital gain, if you invest those dollars and the market goes up, you're happy, right? Everyone's happy. But if the market goes down and we can harvest those losses, that's going to offset the capital gain. And so in March, where it worked out the best was March of 2020. We had a client sell a business and we got it all invested, and it looked like a bad deal at the time because, in March of 2020, the stock market dropped 20-30% in like 3 weeks. But instead of just sitting there and waiting for it to come back, we do something called tax loss harvesting. So let's just say you were in the Schwab S&P 500 ETF, and the thing dropped 30%. So what we do then is, instead of just waiting for it to come back, we'll sell it, but then immediately buy another investment that's highly or almost exactly correlated with the investment that we sold. So maybe we buy the Vanguard large cap index. So those two funds completely correlate together. And so by doing this, as the market is going down, we were able to harvest those losses. And then at the end of the year, when that client's tax bill came due, we had these losses to offset the big gain that they had. And 2020 was awesome because the market fully recovered. So I almost looked at those tax losses that we harvested as fake losses. They didn't lose anything. But and so that's something that we do every year, not just in bad years. If you have a position, the market's down and the position's down $5,000, why not harvest it? Because you just keep on building this bucket of losses. Like I said, that don't really, you're not accepting the loss, but you're creating a paper loss. And then down the road, when you do realize gains, we have this bucket of losses to offset those gains, and clients pay no taxes. And people are always amazed. We'll be doing this over their relationship with us, and then they'll sell a piece of real estate for a big gain. And we'll say, hey, you either owe much less in tax or no tax. And so I think tax loss harvesting is one of the most powerful things you can do, but it's something that people just don't do on their own. You got to be on top of it. And that's why I have a trader on my team, and I instruct him, hey, if this client has any loss in any position, harvest that loss. We want to keep on building that bucket. And so like the client this year is kind of interesting. When the market is going down, instead of him calling and saying, I can't believe it's going down, he's like, how much tax am I saving? Now, how much have you harvested in losses? So I think that tool and that vehicle is as good as it gets. There's other things that people use to minimize taxes. There's certain investments, that you can buy that have tax benefits. You invest in areas of cities that are not very attractive. There's some tax breaks that you can get by doing that. Opportunity zone funds is what I was thinking of. So there's that, but more and more, it's a game. The government tries to close all the loopholes they can, and so you got to stay on top of it. They'll usually close one and then something else opens up. So there's not a lot of tools out there to minimize, ordinary income taxes or capital gains taxes, but the tax loss harvesting is definitely an important strategy.
So this is so interesting. This is one of the reasons why I appreciate bringing this up. And I love the way you think about this, because I think about it like almost like an engine, a 6-cylinder engine, right? It's this concept of, hey, when you go up, one of these things, one of the cylinders are going up, which is one of your, diversified portfolio. One goes up, making some revenue, cashing out, cool. But then also one's down, and you're able to harness that loss, like you mentioned, harvest that loss, excuse me. And what it offsets, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's $1 for dollar. So, hey, you know what? You lost $500,000 over here, but you gained $3 million over here. Well, you can take $500,000 off of that. That $3 million gain. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. That's correct.
Gotcha. Now, I do know, and this is really good information in regards to maybe even alternative investments as well. Let's say you invest into a VC, et cetera, or whatever, and that doesn't turn, you can harvest that loss as well somehow. Yeah,
sure.
I would imagine. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anytime you lose money on an investment, you can harvest it. But we like to harvest it in a way where we're not accepting the loss as permanent. We're taking, the market went down, and we're going to do a lateral move, capture the loss on paper, but buy basically the same thing from a different company.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so you'll harvest that, and then just those small incremental things, but you're still buying, and then you're obviously anticipating the long run. Okay, I like that.
Yep.
Very sexy strategy. Very, very sexy. That's one of the reasons why creative planning's top notch. So many people work with you guys. Kevin, man, I love this conversation today, and I know we could dive into this, just infrastructure and a lot of technical stuff, but kind of really giving us a really good arch understanding how to think about this. For those that had liquidity recently that are like, hey, you know what? I need to ask these right questions. I need to build out the right structure. And I want to also talk about those that have more that legacy, right? Maybe they're ending their life a little bit, 80, 90, they're kind of looking, okay, how do I, I said that wrong, but you get what I'm saying. They're passing away, and they want to obviously build that legacy and build that foundation properly. And having that right perspective as well. So unpacking a lot of this stuff, this has been a really fun conversation. For those that want to learn more, to consume, I know Creative Planning has a lot of good content on its website, but how do they reach out to you if they have some questions?
They can reach out to me, Kevin.Timmerman at creativeplanning.com. So KEVIN.TIMMERMAN at creativeplanning.com. We'll get a hold of me, or I can be reached by phone at 563-552-6352.
Oh, shoot. He gave everybody at this audience his phone number. So that is huge. Kevin, I really appreciate that. That means a lot. Definitely, for someone like yourself that is working with so many different clients and being very accessible like that, that shows a lot of credibility for yourself.
Yeah, you bet.
Kevin. All right, Kevin. I appreciate you being on here. I always love to ask my guys, those links are in the description, by the way. So make sure you stop what you're doing and make sure you reach out to Kevin. I always love to ask my guests before I let you go, is there any last words of wisdom they'd like to share with our audience?
Any last words of wisdom? Your behavior will have a much bigger impact on your net worth than any investment you choose. So keep an eye on your behavior more so than the investments that you're investing in.
And like Kevin said, get a financial therapist so they can
exactly.
help you do that. Yeah. That is beautiful. That is awesome, guys. Please, that is my friend, wealth manager at Creative Planning, my friend Kevin Timmerman. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can.
Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandeevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.